Hi guys, this is not my normal content, but I did want to make a video about it anyways. I had a lot of people asking me in my chat, well, did you see what happened with this and that and blah blah blah. And I realized the developer update is out, and yeah. It's a pretty interesting one, but it's not interesting for the reasons that I would typically hope. Let's get into it. So to start, we have player cards coming to DBD. We kind of knew about this obviously from the anniversary stream. I'm not very big on it. I think having more ways to express yourself outside of, cosmetics and charms and all that other jazz is nice, but I don't know, I'm not particularly that interested, but I think it's good for those that do want it. I think the preview of it so far looks great, so. But the real meat of it, like I guess more so what I have an issue with is the new Trickster buff. There are some really good players and some really good people that main him, that make him look like an absolute beast of a killer. Off the top of my head, I typically think like Worst Dwight. I think a lot of people, even posted on the official TikTok, congratulations by the way. I think that's an awesome thing to, have put out there. But I think an issue with behavior is that typically whenever it comes to buffing something or even balancing, they always take it from like 0 to 100. Like, typically there's no middle ground. Like, we recently just saw this when they nerfed Borgo, which I think a lot of people were super excited for. Not necessarily nerfed in all the ways that we hoped, but they nerfed it by taking the number of pallets from around 40-ish to about 8. And so when you think of that, you're like, damn, that's pretty excessive. And so 8 entire pallets to use between 4 survivors, through that entire map, it's pretty stingy, it's pretty stingy. Then when they went ahead and re-added a couple more pallets, it put it back up to about 18. I think 18 should have been like the first number that they tried, or somewhere around there. And following that trend, here comes Trickster as well with the buff, but was the buff really like that necessary? Again, I feel like they've added way too much all at once instead of small incremental changes that can be, better balanced along the way. Because typically whenever they do decide to, buff or nerf something, a lot of the time they will just leave it after that said change, and then it may take months or maybe even years to actually get something going with that. Another great example is, before the iteration of Freddy that we have now, do I think that his kit was a little bit too strong, a little bit too powerful? Depending on what people bought and how they played, absolutely, yeah. But the thing is they've nerfed him absolutely into the ground. He doesn't even have that many good add-ons. I think the map mobility is still great and everything, but just in general, he got knocked down quite a bit in tiers, after that nerf. But they've also talked about a potential Freddy buff incoming, but we have yet to see that. And then same thing with Twins, Twins have yet to receive their actual buff, and Twins have been out since 2020, or even Myers has yet to receive an actual buff. Those kinds of things. So why Trickster of all killers? But the real important information is that the Trickster now throws 4 blades per second. It was 3 by default. And his throw weight now no longer increases with each blade thrown. That's fine. That's like a pretty basic change, okay? But in addition to that, they've also increased the laceration meter to 8 hits. It was 6, as well as decreased the time before it decays to 10 seconds, and it was 15. This means the laceration meter will fill at the same rate as before, but successfully dodging blades can be a little bit more rewarding. Okay, I understand that as well, but when it comes to dodging like projectile killers, whether it's Huntress, Trickster, Slinger, Spear, I've noticed that ever since they've changed like survivor animation, in general, survivors don't pivot as far out as they used to. I think you can still like do it to a degree, but it's not anywhere nearly as effective. And considering like how bad latency has been ever since the event has started, but then also, survivors hitboxes just in general being kind of scuffed, and then there's even eventual like server issues and whatnot that pop up even outside of the event, by the way, as well as what we have going on now, which is vaults being broken for female survivors. There's just a lot of stuff that goes into that. And then lastly, recoil when rapidly throwing blades can be tricky to deal with, particularly for those playing with a controller. Therefore, they removed recoil entirely. So instead of creating like a separate mechanic for those that are using controller, or to like better adjust and whatnot, they've just completely scrapped the mechanic of recoil entirely. And again, like, I'm not sure why that is. Instead of creating, actual more thought out solutions, it just makes it a lot more linear as a whole. And again, that's not something that I can really agree with in the nature of balancing games. They've also made Trickster 115. This is also like, this one is also a really big issue for me as well. I'm really confused because 110 I feel like was fine with the amount of blades that he had and whatnot and everything else, and then add-ons, you know, to help further that. But 115 with his blades, I think is going to be pretty nutty. Obviously, the tear radius increase, you know, to 32 meters from 24 is a nice change so that people have a better warning of him coming, but I really don't understand why this change was thrown in here as well. Like, I just don't think it's gonna pan out the way that they're wanting it to necessarily. But then main event is like the whole thing that everybody's talking about. Like, that's the major component. Main event now requires 6 blades from 30. Again, 30 to 6, like they couldn't find like a better middle ground or something like that. That's the thing that's like really driving me up the wall, you know. From 30 to 6 is a really big change. Maybe to them it doesn't sound like that big of a change on paper, but in the terms of gameplay, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But main event's duration has been reduced to 5 seconds, which was beforehand 10. I just think Trickster as a whole is really good at camping, so these changes to main event especially will probably make it a little bit more annoying. Yeah, the anti-camp feature exists, but I will say it's not really prevented that much. It kind of makes some killers like not want to camp as much, but even then they'll just camp from afar. I still bring reassurance in my builds and whatnot because of it. But the real kicker to this is the fact that main event can actually be activated in 4 instead of 6 with add-ons. But in addition to that, with Death Throws, the Eerie add-on, it makes it so that as soon as main event finishes, it's replenished like your entire blades. Again, this is an oversight that I'm just not sure like how this kind of stuff happens, you know? And it's something that's really frustrating, especially because I feel like there are so many more opportunities and so many more killers, you know, that deserved a buff over Trickster. I feel like he was in a pretty decent spot, but I don't know. And then another controversial one is Made for This being changed. Me personally, I didn't use Made for This all that much when it first came out, like sure, because it was kind of like a funny haha, but eventually it just became a meh perk. I didn't get like crazy amounts of value out of it, so I didn't really run it as often. And then in my killer games, I noticed a lot of people running it, but I didn't really feel the effects of it all that much. I really didn't. And so when a lot of people were making a big fuss about Made for This, I feel like the people that complain more about speed and whatnot, it's, I don't want to say like a minority, but I notice a lot of those people, sometimes I literally go back and watch VODs of people, and you know, they're like, oh, this person has Made for This, person, I can tell they have Made for This. And then the person doesn't have Made for This. Sometimes I feel like people kind of get paranoid and they feel like, oh, well, obviously this person has Made for This because I'm losing. And that's a them issue. Now, I could see them, you know, making it so that maybe it's not even like 3% faster, maybe like 2% faster. I don't know. Something smaller than that. Also had a great suggestion where if somebody is actually running Made for This, you get an icon while you're in chase that lets you know that that survivor has Made for This, and so you can decide preemptively whether or not you would like to drop the chase. I think that would have also been a great solution before, again, making it so that it only is active for the speed portion while you're in Deep Wound. It also applies while you're exhausted as well, which is not that bad, but now I feel like people are going to start running it with Dead Hard, and the gamers that love Dead Hard are going to pull it off, and then people are going to ask, okay, well, maybe it also needs to not work with Exhausted as well. I just feel like Made for This is about to get gutted and get the Dead Hard treatment, where it doesn't get changed just once, maybe not even just twice. Dead Hard has had 3 separate iterations for it, and again, people still complain about it. This is one of those things where we just have to wait and see, I guess. As for the endurance portion, I'm surprised the endurance portion was not changed at all, because I feel like I saw a lot more people complaining about the endurance status effect, but again, that is probably something that they might change in future as well, because we do have a lot more endurance perks like Made for This, endurance with Buckle Up, and metal as well. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised they didn't change that portion, but I guess we'll have to wait and see for that as well. And then we've got Garden of Joy being changed as well, and as well as Red Forest. These two I'm happy to see. I think this is like the only portion of the update that I'm most excited for. I think Garden of Joy is an absolute nightmare to play as killer. Playing as Huntress, literally terrible. I feel like a lot of the newer maps, just in general, do not take older killers into consideration. This includes Hillbilly, of course, with their hitboxes being like screwed over the worst. Even just like the smallest portion of a bush will fuck over a Billy Curve, it'll fuck over a Huntress Hatchet. And then my main issue with Red Forest, despite its size, is the fact that whenever they rework these maps, they add this weird haze effect to it, and it makes it really hard for me to tell like what exactly is going on in the match. And this isn't just about, you know, my line of sight being blocked, it's like more of an accessibility issue. Makes me feel like I really have to focus because I can't discern like how far away some things are because of how hazy it is. Like even in the picture right now, like if I stare at it for too long, it just kind of makes my eyes go a little bonkers. There are a lot of accessibility issues in DBD, and I just quite frankly feel like they've not been talking about them enough. They've not been addressing them enough, and we haven't seen enough solutions as well. And I feel like a lot of the community doesn't know as much about it as they need to. But that's kind of my gist for the developer update. It's interesting, like I said, but it's not interesting for the reasons that I was particularly hoping for. Hopefully I will see you guys in the next one. You can catch me live on Twitch, twitch.tv/LuluPie101. I've got all my social links down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much.